Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Saturdays with Dad. As you may not have noticed, if you any of you with a keen eye, we've actually got more professional equipment now. We've got some microphones so that maybe the audio quality will sound a bit better. So this is like a trial run kind of thing. But do you want to introduce today's video? Because I think this one's going to just be mainly you talking the whole time.
Well, no, I don't understand pun, but basically, it is today's video is about the music of one of the greatest rock bands or bands ever, the Grateful Dead, and the theme of it really is that if you want to listen to the Grateful Dead, what's the best introduction level and everything like that.
So I think you can safely say you've come to the right place.
Maybe. If I'll give you a brief history, and this is something that Neve has said, which is very, very true. When you listen to music, more often than not, it is the albums or the bands that you listen to that you think, they're all right, but not really my kind of thing, that you end up loving the most. And albums that, when you first listen to them, think, not for me, not for me, that. And then you persist with it. And if they are truly great musicians and a great band, you then learn to love them. And that is the case with me and the Grateful Dead. So if I take you back now to 1970, and a friend of mine recommended Live Dead to me. And first of all, I listened to it, and he played the feedback track on it, and I thought, what the hell is this? Live Dead is now in my top 5 albums of all time. I love it. So that's a good example. So to the people that know the Dead and like the Dead out there, I'm going to apologise first of all, because if we're doing an introduction to the Grateful Dead and everything like that, it's good to know the sort of a brief history of who they are and everything. So they were formed in basically 1964 as a band called the Warlocks, and they then wanted to change their name. I think Bill Kreutzmann was reading The Lord of the Rings, and he wanted to call the band something like Mithrandir or something like that, simply because he just loved that. But they ended up, Phil Lesh who was at I think one of the big university, and could have been at Stanford.
I thought you said it was Berkeley.
Or Berkeley, I can't remember which one. And he was reading some English poetry, and he read this line, I think it was Pope or something like that: the unquiet grave, the jilted lover, and the Grateful Dead. And he decided then, that's a good name for a band. So let me tell you the basic band of the Grateful Dead. They have mutated over the years and everything like that, but you know, to everyone out there, they know Jerry Garcia, who's sadly lamentably dead now, as the lead guitarist and guitarist of everything, you know, sort of like pedal steel, banjo, mandolin. That's Jerry. Bob Weir, who is basically one of the singers. Of course, Jerry's a singer as well. Bob Weir, who is the rhythm guitarist and also the singer. Phil Lesh, another composer and a singer, and one of the best bassists I've ever heard. Bass guitar, obviously. Billy Kreutzmann, who is the drummer, and Mickey Hart, who's the drummer and percussionist. The original lineup had a guy called Ron McKernan, who was a guy who was mainly into blues, and a lot of the stuff the Dead did, which was blues stuff, was because of Ron McKernan. And he died, and ever since then they sort of had different keyboards, you know, players. I mean, I think that one of Jerry's friends, Merle Saunders, played with the Dead for some time. Then Keith and Donald Godchaux then joined the band, and then it went to Brent Myland in the 80s until he died, unfortunately, in the 90s. And then it ended up with Jeff Clementi and, believe it or not, oh crikey, my memory is. I'll come back to it, but but my favourite keyboards player was possibly one of the first keyboards player for them, Tom Constantin, who was a fantastic keyboards player, and there we go. So the Dead's music spans all different facades. There is the studio Dead stuff, which is wonderful, and the live Dead stuff, which is incredible. Well, it's just all incredible. The live Dead albums, or their live concerts, were punctuated by huge long jams. So it was quite challenging musically to get into them, whereas the studio albums tended to be much more, how shall I put it, shorter songs, a bit more, with the exception of Workingman's Dead, a bit more light-hearted. There was, the country feel in it, and they played every single type of music, blues, country, and if you listen to Terrapin Station, progressive rock, but to me, the formative and the best years of the Dead came between 1968 and 1980. Those are my favourite years of the Dead. I think they kind of lost their way, because I think a lot of bands that I loved in the 70s, the Genesises, the Emerson, Lake and Palmers, they were all trying to buy into this new sort of video age, MTV age of, pop rock and things like that.
Staying relevant.
Sorry?
Staying relevant.
Yeah. But, to be fair, I think probably the Dead made more money in the 80s, like, Genesis and Phil Collins, than they did in the 70s. I think their biggest hit was Touch of Grey, which, I think got into the top 10 in the US, which was just unheard of for the Dead. But to me, as an experienced Deadhead, I love the live albums. But
do you prefer it to studio, or?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the studio albums, but if you're listening to an LP or vinyl, you want to listen to the whole majesty of that group. I mean, obviously, like any live albums, they have the good days and the bad days, the good gigs and the bad gigs, but when they had the good gigs, cool. When I saw them at Wembley in 1972, I mean, they were great in 74 in the Alexandra Palace, but in 72 at the Empire Pool, Wembley, they won. That to me, tour was triumphant, not just for the Dead, but apparently their concert at Bickershaw Festival, when it was pouring with rain. I didn't go. I wanted to escape school to go to it, but I couldn't. And also all over Europe, the Paris concerts, which now apparently are coming out on
that's Record Store Day, isn't it?
On Record Store Day, which have we ordered that yet?
I think you probably have.
Oh yes, I have. Yeah. So as I would say, the first few albums were very exploratory. Anthem of the Sun, Arxa Moxoa, even the first Dead album. We're going on the studio albums. So for someone who's coming into the Dead immediately, they probably wouldn't look at those so much. Okay. For me, for anybody who likes, sort of not mid, what was it, sort of rock and with a folky feel attached to it,
kind of classic rock kind of stuff.
Kind of classic rock, kind of Fleetwood Mackie kind of thing, kind of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The entry level to me is without doubt American Beauty. American Beauty is a fine album, and it is no sort of coincidence whatsoever that a lot of the tracks on American Beauty, like Sugar Magnolia, for instance, are played live in extended versions, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff they do, you know, in the studio when they obviously play it live. You know, without further ado, I will show you now a copy of the album which I've just recommended to anybody first getting into the Dead. And I think it was the one I played to you first of all, wasn't it?
Probably one of them at least.
This one. So this is a special limited edition version of American Beauty. This album is got a very much sort of like a folk, a blues kind of thing, but it's not really rock. It's more like a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album, and of course David Crosby is on this album as well. Attics of My Life, which is I think the song that finished the Chicago Fairly Well concerts, is just so beautiful. And so I recommend this, and I also would recommend, if I can find it, here it is, this album, Workingman's Dead. This one is on the same kind of level as American Beauty, but this sort of has a kind of darker feel.
Okay.
I mean, there's one which there's a track called Black Peter, which is about a bloke who's dying in bed.
Okay.
So that's really nice, and of course it's got the two great tracks on this, Uncle John's Bands and Casey Jones, which ends the album. But I like sort of things like Dire Wolf, and High Time is just a great album. So this is sorry, right way round. This is the Workingman's Dead album, which is superb, of course. And then they sort of went after those albums. Or just before I throw these two into the mix as well. So these were the earlier Dead studio albums. This is Anthem of the Sun.
This is a picture disc, isn't it?
And it's a picture disc. And this is Aoxomoxoa. And there's an interesting story in this one here. I think one of the little girls here is actually Courtney Love.
Right on the back there.
On the back of this, one of the girls, I don't know which one it is, on this album is Courtney Love, because I think at the time her dad was the Dead's manager or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit of
trivia
there. I think I have got it here. Yes, and we go right back. This is very experimental, so. But this is the Dead's first album, simply called The Grateful Dead. This is probably during the time of the Kool-Aid acid tests, you know, Timothy Leary. At the time that album came out, I think LSD was still legal in the States. And I mean, it's very experimental, but it's obviously, to me, an acquired taste. So you got the sort of everything up to around about early 1970s ish, and then they sort of went on a sort of tours around Europe and everything like that, and then they came back, and then they made this album, which is wonderful, which I think is very, very approachable. This is Wake of the Flood with the Raven, very Prog. And it's got some great tracks. Row Jimmy Row, one of my favourite Dead tracks of all time, is on this.
What's that?
Stellar Blue.
Okay.
I played that to you, didn't I?
I think
Yeah,
so.
and that is absolutely wondrously beautiful. So this is The Wake of the Flood, and also this album as well then came out later, I think, Blues for Aloe. Again, this is a sort of the feel of a studio Dead album in the sense that there's a load of tracks which aren't that long, you know, ranging from 3 minutes to 6 minutes. I like this, but I think they're better at studio albums by the Dead.
Okay.
Okay, one studio album which I think I recommend after American Beauty and Workingman's Dead, for anybody trying to get into them. This one. This is from the Mars Hotel. And they've got some great stuff. Scarlet Begonias, which is just wonderful. US Blues, and I love China Doll. And this has got a nice laid-back feel to it. Again, the Dead studio album, so all the tracks are relatively short in consideration of who the Dead are.
Yeah.
And then probably
For all the prog lovers.
for all the prog lovers, an album which that was they broke away from well, I just think their record company went bankrupt, and so they signed with Arista Records, and Keith Olsen said, look, what you need to do is make another completely different album, and a bit more sort of like proggy sort of thing. So they came out with this album, Terrapin Station, which is, I mean, the first side of it, side one, is the one with a great track, Estimated Profit, and it's also had that prog feel, finishing with the whole of the second side. This is so typically prog. It's all loaded in with different time signatures and everything like that, and it's just magnificent. And I really, a lot of people pan this album. I actually love it. I think the Dead should have done a lot more prog stuff, because they're all such good musicians that they could easily pull it off. But having gone through the studio albums now, we then go into the terrain now of the
You're into the studio albums now. Where do you go from here?
So you go into the live albums. So you've listened to all these albums, and think, oh, they're really good and everything, but I need something a little bit more challenging and something a bit more good. And what a better band than I think almost the word jam band was made about the Grateful Dead. They are notorious, like Fish are, the sort of be wrong thing to say reincarnation of them, but they have that sort of feel where their live concerts really make it, and obviously the Dead do as well. So going to a Dead concert is just unbelievable. People who've seen them will know how amazing the atmosphere is, or was, at a Dead concert. And when they were put into vinyl, I think that it comes across as how good it was. So probably the most accessible of the live albums is this one, which is the 1971 live Fillmore West concert, and it's got some fantastic stuff on this. There's their version of Me and Bobby McGee. Unfortunately, as brilliant as it is, we know whose best version of that it is, don't we? Janice. But it's got great, there's a Merle Haggard song in here, Mama Try, and one of their great songs, I mean, everybody loves it, Bertha, who I believe this lady is Bertha. The skeleton. So she, that opens it, and in fact, a lot of it, I think both times I saw the Dead, Neve, but the first concert, the first number was Bertha.
Okay, so it's like an opening thing.
Yeah. So that's the live one, and it's got some Me and My Uncle, it's got Wolf Rat on it, and it's just a great.
Is that a Chuck Berry cover? And
of course their version of Johnny B. Good. Sorry, the good one, me. Yeah, but before we go to the next one, the other keyboards player, which my memory left me. Going back to earlier, I was talking about the keyboards player. It was, of course, Bruce Hornsby, who's a great keyboards player, but surprising because his music was so sort of like radio friendly, had loads of hits and everything like that. Marvellous keyboards player, but did a great job for the Dead. So then we go to the next one, which I consider almost peerless, except for one live album, but is so good, and it shows that the Dead can travel. This is one, a 3-album set.
Triple album.
And it's the Europe's 1972 album, and it has obviously a sentimental value to me, because basically a couple of the songs I actually saw live when I saw them at the Empire Pool in Wembley in 1972. I think there's a couple of songs from Bickershaw, but what I'm really excited about is the Record Store Day imminent
The Paris
arrival
one.
of the Paris gig, which is stuff of legend. And this, I think, probably in a funny sort of way, with the exception of the keyboards. I mean, don't get me wrong, Keith Godshow's a great keyboards player. It is probably technically their best live album. I think it's great, and it's got a lot of stuff in it. And it was the final album that Ron McKernan, Pigpen was on. And that is fantastic. I mean, there's a long version of Trucking, which is great. Cumberland Blues is the opener, which is great. He's Gone. Tennessee Jed, which is fantastic as well. All great numbers. And of course, they do a live version of Sugar Magnolia, which is, well, fantastic.
That's the one you're at, isn't it? Side 1, track 1.
Yeah, was that Empire Pool? Yeah, I mean, it may have not been that particular night, but I was there at one of them anyhow. If there's any people up there and they sort of not upgraded, but they've got more into the vibe of the Dead, and they want to start knowing about their live stuff, I recommend not the Europe 72, probably the Europe 72 and that other album. But to me and to a lot of other Deadheads out there, and let's face it, there are a lot, even in England, that the defining live album is this one. Live Dead. This was made, I believe, in San Francisco in 1969. It's got Turn On Your Love Light. It's got St. Stephen the 11. And it's got The Wondrous Dark Star. I mean, Dark Star, to me, if someone said to me, which is the ultimate jam piece of music that has ever been made, it would be Dark Star. So good that I named my company Dark Star, but that's another thing. So anyhow, so this one is fantastic. It's a little bit more challenging, but you know, it's something well worth. Once you get into it and get the vibe of it, you will not put it down. It's just a fantastic album. So that's it.
And I think that might be the end now.
Yes, I think so. I mean, just one other thing. There are other solo albums that were made by Robert Hunter and the rest of the Dead, which are all fantastic. I mean, I could go on. We've only got a limited space of time, but Bob Acewheel one was fantastic, and the first Jerry Garcia and the Garcia Mel Saunders and everything like that, and of course the wonder that is Hooterole. But I won't. So that's about it. And you know, the thing is, I can completely understand if after listening to them you think to yourself, you know what, I've listened to American Beauty. It's not for me. It's not for everyone. But I'd like to think that this video would help people who want to get to know this wonderful group, and they brought so much music to the lives of millions of people, and their charitable parts. Then they're doing a load of benefit gigs. You know, they're very much into the environment and everything like that. So they give a lot back. They're like fish. They do give a lot back to society. You know, obviously they lived a quite tarnished life, no more so than Jerry himself. But just a group of incredibly talented musicians. And if you like music, and I'm sure watching Neve's channels and everything and what she does, you do like music, it's probably worth giving the Dead a listen.
Because you ramble so much about them.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've gone on overnight.
No, it's fine. Absolutely fine. And that's the point of the video.
I mean, you know, what do you think of them as a band?
I like them. Yeah, I think they're good.
Do you think they're sort of, you would call them a groundbreaking band for the time?
Yeah, I mean, I like prog, so I like longer, extended music.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoy the fact that a group can take a song that's like less than 5 minutes
Yeah.
and turn it into like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
That's always interesting for me, at least. Yeah, that's it really. I think they're a good group.
And that's it really. I think I've sort of covered not all the bases, but a lot of the bases.
Beginning.
And you know, I hope that you get something out of this video and get spinning American Beauty.
Yeah, so maybe in the comments let us know what your opinions on this group are, if you like them, if you don't. Yeah, I know a lot of people have actually got records based on your recommendation. I've had quite a few comments talking about the Stephen Wilson albums people have gotten based on your recommendation. So possibly people will be picking up more Grateful Dead records based on your recommendations.
Well, hopefully. They're coming out on Record Store Day. The Dead, that is one.
And yeah, if you haven't noticed, Dad's beard is gone. It's gone now.
Well, I was still there, but I had a massive Santa beard removed. That's about it really, but I hope you enjoyed the video anyhow.
Yeah, and as I did a community post this morning, I think, I do have a very special guest on Monday, so you guys can look forward to that, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Have a good week. Bye.